You might be tired, so I very appreciate your presence. I will try to be as light as possible given the topic. So I'm presenting today joint work with my co-author Felix Modrego from Chile. And let me say that I couldn't think of a better match between the first presentation and the second one, because it's in a way our presentation is combining, is following up what Aurélie was presenting and what came out in the Q&A. So let me start with the motivation for the paper, and let me start presenting evidence from the two countries where me and my co-authors are from, and it's Italy and Chile. And of course, the motivation is about administrative fragmentation. It's something we already discussed in the previous hour, something that we all probably work on. And just to provide you some evidence, Italy has 60 million inhabitants and more than 8,000 municipalities. Chile has a third of that inhabitants, 18 millions, but only 345 municipalities. Since most of the audience, most of you guys are from France, probably. I mean, we just know that France is a case of even more fragmentation. And of course, as we already discussed before, and as we probably all know, there is an intrinsic tension between two dimensions. On one side, the literature on fiscal federalism and the idea that smaller jurisdictions are more competent in providing public goods, local public goods, especially when there are heterogeneous local preferences. And yet, as we discussed before, excessive fragmentation may lead to negative externalities or insufficient provisions of public goods, especially the kind of public goods that require economies of scale and scope to ripe. And so, as following up what Aurélie was arguing, was claiming about, many governments have been trying to reduce fragmentation. Italy and Spain are two paradigmatic examples, but the literature tells us that this has been trying to be done in Germany, in Finland, and in other countries around Europe and around the world. So the key point now, and this is in a way, now you may understand the questions I was posing before in the Q&A, is we understand that we need to reduce fragmentation sometimes, but does increasing the scale of public administration concretely work in practice? And this is a key issue because it's an empirical issue more than theoretical, perhaps, because the theory tells us that many times we need to reduce fragmentation. And in a way, I want to draw your attention on two broad bodies of literature. The first one is on mergers. So when municipalities, so very local administrations are merged together or are forced to merge together. And paradoxically, I mean, the evidence here, I'm just citing two papers, but this literature is very broad. And this kind of literature finds that the effects of mergers on frequently on local public spending are either insignificant or negative. And the story seems to be that there is a free riding or a common pool resources where municipalities, for example, before the mergers, start overspending because they know that they will be merged, and so they won't pay the prices for what they are doing. So in a way, inter-municipal cooperation has been discussed as a more flexible way to achieve economies of scale and scope, because it's seen to be as more attractive, as more flexible, and also circumventing these problems of free riding and common pool resources issues that I was referring to for mergers. A second motivation for the kind of exercise that we are thinking about, so identifying the optimal scale, of course, is linked to austerity. And I hope to cheer you up and attract your attention with this funny image. But the point here is that especially after economic crisis, budget constraints become very important, and so local administrations, particularly small municipalities, face high challenges in providing public goods and providing services to citizens. Funny enough, I will talk for this paper. The paper I'm presenting today started before the COVID economic crisis, but again, and we thought that it was something left from the 2008 crisis, but again, we are talking about austerity. I don't know what's the debate in France. Perhaps you're already starting. Here in the UK, where I live, the government has already started talking about the next austerity following the COVID recovery. So already this week, the Prime Minister was discussing about austerity measures for the next year. To this, so I want to say that austerity, and the search for efficiency is really a key, a paramount issue in public administration and in local government in particular. So the point is, we know that inter-municipal cooperation is seen as a potential tool to increase austerity, to increase efficiency, but the evidence is inconclusive. So is it inter-municipal cooperation a solution or not? We don't know. There is growing research, much less than for mergers, but there is still, anyway, there is research out there, but it's mostly exploratory, so it's not addressing in a causal way the identification, and findings are contradictory. I want to attract your attention to two, perhaps three papers I will refer to. One is on France. Actually, is carried out by Lionel and Marie. Is carried out probably one of your former or current colleagues from Dijon, and he and his co-authors do not find any significant effect on local spending. So intermunicipal cooperation doesn't seem to increase or to provide the efficiency dividend that we would hope for. In Italy, there was little literature until recently. In 2018, a new paper came out. It's the identification is relatively robust, so quite convincing, and they do find that joining an intermunicipal cooperation increases efficiency, or to be more precise, leads to a reduction in per capita expenditure while not reducing the service provided. The point is that they analyze only one small part of Italy, and they analyze one area where the quality of institutions is best, the region of Emilia-Romagna. So the external validity is arguable. More importantly, none of the papers that I'm aware, to my best knowledge, focus on efficiency. So they focus either on spending, or they try to analyze along two parallel directions, spending and public services, but they don't combine the two. And this is a critical flaw, because mergers or intermunicipal cooperation arrangements may lead to, may be done not to reduce expenditure. For example, small municipalities may decide that they are not interested in reducing expenditure, but they may join together because they want to increase the level of services provided, keeping expenditure at the same level. So it's important to combine the analysis of expenditure and service provided and focus on efficiency. So the research question that we are trying to address in this paper is very simple, and we try to understand, as you can imagine from the title, if the municipality unions, as they are called in Italy, so the intermunicipal cooperation bodies are called municipality unions, or unioni di comuni in Italian, and I will use these different names throughout the presentation. And we try to see whether they have a positive effect on the efficiency of small municipalities across the country. Our contribution is double. The first one is to develop a novel measure of spending efficiency for each municipality. Perhaps this is inputs that could be applied to other countries, and I'm very happy to hear your thoughts or your views about the about how we do it. And then we try to use this index to exploit in a quasi-experimental research design and see if there is the joining a municipal union has any impact on efficiency. Before going forward, um, um, let me spoiler the fact that it's if you have a skim through the paper which was shared, you may know already, but we do not find any significant effect on efficiency, unfortunately. So before going forward on the introducing the case, the empirical case, I'm happy to leave room for any questions you may have. I'm told that one should count up to 5, so I will leave 5 seconds of silence if anyone has questions, and then I will progress.
Any questions?
Yeah, perfect. I guess it's crystal clear, and thanks, Yvonne. So let me introduce you very quickly the Italian case, or the empirical case. In a way, it's not too dissimilar from France. So I think the findings can somehow be interesting for in terms of external validity to the French case. First of all, Italy I anticipated, has a high number of municipalities, less than France, but still comparatively high, so high fragmentation. And hence in the 90s, the legislator decided to introduce what I would say are called municipality unions, so inter-municipal cooperation bodies. Uh, Inter-municipal cooperation bodies are formal independent entity which municipalities join, and with which they establish a formal agreement for the provision of some services, and to which they transfer some money. As I was saying, this provision was introduced in 1990, but for the first years it didn't attract much attention. Very importantly for our identification, the law mentions specifically a population threshold, so it established these cooperation bodies as something for municipalities below 5,000 inhabitants. And this was seen as a first step toward full mergers. This population threshold, of course, is very important for our identification, was temporarily cancelled in 1999 in a second piece of legislation, but was then reintroduced in 2010 when intermunicipal cooperation became compulsory. So municipality then, after 2010, were compulsory forced to require to join an intermunicipal cooperation body initially by the end of 2016. Then this limit was extended, but the point is that doing our period of analysis, being below 5,000 inhabitants was making a municipality compulsory joining a cooperation body. Of course, as you can clearly imagine from my stress on this population threshold, we will use it for identification in a fuzzy RDD empirical setting. To give you an overall picture of intermunicipal cooperation in Italy over the period of analysis, here you see on the right-hand side, you see a map, and you see that the cooperation bodies, which are municipalities, part of each of these cooperation bodies, they are mapped in dark, and they are scattered more or less all across the country. So there is not a big difference between regions of the north and the south. It's although some regions, of course, have a higher incidence. If we talk about the number of municipalities which joined, you see the graph on the left, and you see in particular the vertical dashed red line is the limit where we will analyze our outcome variable. The year 2013, where we have some data to calculate our efficiency score. On this slide, I want to emphasize that currently almost 37% of the total of municipalities, so almost 3,000 municipalities are part of a inter-municipal cooperation body. And so 19%, so close to 1/5 of the Italian population lives in a region part of a cooperation body. Forgive me 1 second. So how do we calculate our efficiency score? This is really the first novelty of the analysis, where most previous pieces of work have focused on per capita current expenditure only. We are able to combine this input with a detailed list of outputs on services provided by each municipality. This is because in 2013, the Italian government launched a new project where they try to to identify and to measure exactly the services provided by local administrations. And this was done on 12 12 essential quote unquote policy areas, which you see on the right. And the labels are in Italian, but I will translate for you to give you an idea, to give a sense. And you see civil registry, like a tax collection, technical office, so for building permits, other general services, kindergarten, local policing, transport, mobility, territorial management, so aménagement du territoire, instruction, waste collection, and etc. So we are able to identify for each of these 12 areas an indicator which will be used for our efficiency score. Concretely, we build our efficiency score using data envelopment analysis. I'm not going in depth unless you have questions, but what I want to stress here is just it's a non-parametrical method, so it's not based on regression. So we are not assuming any functional form on the data, and it's a technique to assess the relative efficiency of decision-making units to compare to a theoretical frontier of efficiency. So we basically exploit our existing data to build a frontier of efficiency, so to build combination of outputs produced with a minimum amount of inputs. And once we have this frontier, with this virtual frontier of efficiency, each municipality is compared to the frontier, and an index calculated from 0 to 1 is developed. Since data envelopment analysis suffer from some issues, we use the robust data DAI, which is a method that applies a bootstrapping on the raw coefficient. Again, if you have any questions, I'm happy to come back to the more empirical issues during the Q&A. But I will skip it, given we are in the afternoon and already probably tired. So to give you a visual insight on the efficiency score, you see on the left a scatter plot of the efficiency score across Italy, across the Italian municipalities, and you see also the map on the right. As expected, as you will expect, perhaps if you know a bit the context of Italy, you see that overall the index is higher, so it's darker in the north of Italy, especially in parts of the north. So in the south there is less efficiency, and it's consistently with the story of a big north-south divide. But then there are pockets of efficiency and inefficiency, also in inefficient or more efficient regions, respectively. To give you some descriptive statistics, so we start getting into the second part of the exercise. I'm providing here descriptive statistics for the treated municipalities, for those that join the inter-municipal cooperation bodies, and the untreated municipalities. And as you can see, the differences are not very high, but of course, these are just raw differences. So let's get to the empirical strategy. And what we measure, what's the baseline model is very simple. So we want to see whether joining a municipal union, so the U in our equation, has any impact on the efficiency score I on the other side, controlling for a set of covariates. In terms of covariates, just for your information, we include geographical attributes, economic structure, social structure, and institutional conditions, as well as regional fixed effects. Of course, if I'm sure you're already aware, including covariates in an RDD in theory is not strictly necessary, but nevertheless increases the precision of the estimates. So as a first test, we run a matching estimator, just essentially because this compares to previous pieces of work. The point, of course, that the matching estimators we know is based only on observables, so it has still significant issues on omitted variable bias and other endogeneity. So nevertheless, we fail to find a significant efficiency dividend. So you see the efficiency score in treated municipalities is slightly higher, but it's almost 0.5 percentage points, so 0.006 changes in its crude coefficient. And so we fail to find a strong efficiency dividend. And in fact, we see that the municipalities which join an inter-municipal cooperation body have experienced an increase in expenditure. But as I said, of course, the matching estimator is very preliminary. So we move to a more robust fuzzy RDD estimator. And of course, as I anticipated before, we exploit the arbitrary population threshold of 5,000 inhabitants discussed earlier to predict the shift in the probability of unionization. So we estimate a standard, if you want, fuzzy RDD model, where our measure of measure M is being part of a municipal union is instrumented by a dummy for municipalities which are below the population threshold. Of course, when one focuses on an RDD, there are two key points to take into account. The first one is the bandwidth selection, so the bandwidth, so the wideness of the window that we measure around the cutoff. And we know here that there is a trade-off between the precision of the estimate, so a narrow window, so more precise, but in terms of estimate precision, but a higher standard error because we have less information, or a broader bandwidth where we have a less precise estimate, but potentially higher bias, but more statistical power because we have more information. Here we use the optimal method proposed by Canonico et al. If you work on RDD, you know that this is a standard method applied nowadays. A second issue is the definition of polynomials. And here we follow Gelman and Imbens in the 2017 paper, and they suggest that adding high order polynomials is risky because you risk to fail to include zero in your confidence intervals, even when this is not the case in reality. So we mostly test first and second order polynomial in our estimation, our main estimation. Before I move to the results, if you have any questions, again, I will leave 4 or 5 seconds of silence. If you have any questions, just raise your question, please.
we don't have questions in the chat. So
yeah, perfect. So I'll continue. And let me start with presenting the RDD plot. This is a descriptive, just a descriptive graph, but it's common to describe it. And what I want to share is the fact that it's as expected. The the spending efficiency score has a bell shape, follows a bell shaped function. So municipalities, very small municipalities, tend to be less efficient. Efficiency seem to go up to a certain threshold of around 10,000, 15,000 inhabitants, and then for larger municipalities, efficiency starts to go down. Here, of course, I'm trimming very large municipalities, but the graph is the same when including very large municipalities on the right-hand side of the graph. So with this, I want to emphasize that the index seems to be consistent with what the theoretical literature would expect. And yet, we don't see a clear jump in the threshold. Again, this is just descriptive, but it's already a prima facie evidence that there might not be a strong effect of cooperation, or at least at the threshold. So let me move to the results, to the main RDD results. And as you can see, jumping the threshold, so being below the threshold, is indeed a strong predictor of joining an intermunicipal cooperation body. So at least the first stage seemed to be strong, so seem to convince that the analysis is robust in terms of first stage, and yet there is no significant effect on the main on the second stage. Just to let you read the graph, here I'm presenting both conventional, bias-corrected, and robust estimates for both for the first stage and the second stage. These are different outputs provided by our estimator. And I'm also presenting results for column 1, which are for all Italy, without controlling for individual controls. Results for column 2, again, all Italy, controlling for covariates. And then in column 3, we restrict the sample to only the north and center of the country, which were those where the municipalities complied more. And we do this because we were thinking perhaps the reason why we don't find effect is just the first stage is too weak. So we want to be totally sure that we restrict our geographical sample where the compliance of our first stage is stronger, and yet we don't find any effect in the second stage, or at least any significant effect. Of course, there are two key assumptions in an RDD exercise to hold. The first one is that there should not be manipulation at the threshold, so at the 5,000 inhabitants cutoff, because if there is manipulation, so if there are more municipalities than on one side and on the other, there might be some issues behind. So our municipalities won't be distributed as a quasi-randomly, as we will assume. We run the standard McCrary test, and we don't find any evidence of a non-random sorting. So it seems to be all fine for the analysis. The second, of course, we test where the covariates on one side of the cutoff are balanced as opposed to the other side, again, to test for the randomization. If our first stage is effective, we should find randomized covariates on both sides of the cutoff, and as you can see, this seems to be the case. So there is no significant difference between on either side of the 5,000 inhabitants cutoff. So this is to say that the RDD seems to be valid. We equally test for alternative polynomials. Here we test. We said that it's we prefer first and second order. The second order perhaps is the best one. we test an alternative third order polynomial, both for all Italy in columns 1, 2, 3, and only for the north and center Italy for columns 4, 5, and 6. And we see that the only case where our second stage, so there seems to be some evidence of a positive link between unionization, so being part of an inter-municipal cooperation, and efficiency is when considering the third order polynomial for north and central Italy, but we take these results with care because, as we said, the third order polynomial is a risk to risk failing to include zero in the confidence interval. So it's this to be interpreted with care. We equally test for different boundaries. As I was saying, there is a trade-off between different kind of boundaries. We test for different methods, and again, we try different specifications here. You see, again, all Italy, all North and Central Italy, there are no effects whatsoever, or no statistically significant effects. So we try then to, so far, I mean, the main results is that there seem to be no significant effects whatsoever or joining an intermunicipal cooperation body on the municipal efficiency. So we start trying unpackaging the overall efficiency score that we build, and we follow in particular the idea of co-production. So it's an idea which was developed by Elinor Ostrom and collaborators in the Indiana State University since the 80s. And what they say is basically that services that require the active involvement of citizens, so like kindergarten or services where there is a direct interaction between the service provider and the end user, will not benefit from economies of scale. By contrast, it might be only services which do not require co-production, those where you may expect to find economies of scale in mergers or in a larger provision of services. So what we do, we split our index, or we split our policy outputs our 12 policy outputs into two categories: those which require co-production and those which do not require co-production. So we divide them in a way in services of a low economies of scale or and services with potentially high economies of scale. Again, I'm presenting results for the all Italy, only North and Central Italy. You see that the first stage are significant, but the second stage, again, there is no effects whatsoever on any of the categories. So again, we failed to find an intermunicipal cooperation dividend in the data. Finally, and this is will be the final part of my presentation, is we try to address an issue which is known in RDD analysis, and the fact that it's that one threshold may be inappropriate to identify a specific policy impact if the same cutoff is used to determine other policies. This is relates to a super interesting paper written by Andy Eggers and co-authors and published in the American Journal of Political Science a couple of years ago. And in fact, in the case of Italy, the 5,000 inhabitants cutoff is used to inform two other main policies. So our RDD analysis may somehow be still endogenous on these grounds. The policy changes, which are also changed at the 5,000 inhabitants threshold, are the salary of the mayor and the executive. So in fact, mayors in municipalities above 5,000 inhabitants are higher, the salaries. So higher wages, of course, may attract more educated, hence more capable individuals, which in turn may affect efficiency. So this again may be a spurious factor behind the results. Second, municipalities below the 5,000 inhabitants threshold in Italy are exempted from state-imposed fiscal rules. So they can take debts more easily. So as a way to address these multiple treatments, we implement two different strategies. For the salary of the mayor, we adopt what is called cross-sectional difference in discontinuity. So, and forgive me for. So, the idea here, or the cross-sectional diff in this, is to compare RDD effects on efficiency measured at the different thresholds where the mayor salary change, so the confounding policy changes, but where propensity to cooperation does not change. So we exploit the alternative threshold of 1,000 and 3,000 inhabitants. The idea here is that if we found a significant effect of this alternative threshold on efficiency, there would be evidence that this confounding policy, that the salary of the mayor may be also a potential confounding also in the 5,000 inhabitant cutoff that we use for our analysis. In the second case, in the second policy that changes at the 5,000 inhabitants, the ability to accumulate debt, we don't have other thresholds to exploit for identification. But so what we do is we implement a sharp, this time sharp, not fuzzy, RDD on the expenditure at our cutoff. The idea is that if there are indeed borrowing deficit restriction affecting changing at this cutoff, they will impact our measure of efficiency through a change in expenditure. So if we do find, or turn it the other way, if we do not find any effect of a at the 5,000 inhabitants cutoff on expenditure, we can safely assume that the accumulating debt is not influencing our efficiency measure. So I'm presenting the results here. The first two columns are refer to the difference in discontinuity, so this part. While the final column refers to the second part of the part about debt. And as you can see, there is no effect of the alternative thresholds on efficiency. So providing us with some confidence that there is no confounding effect of a mayoral experience or mayoral pace on our results. Similarly, the threshold, the 5,000 inhabitants thresholds has a negative sign on per capita expenditure. So as you would expect, in other words, when you jump the thresholds on one side, there is indeed a change in expenditure, perhaps through this ability to accumulate debt, but the measure is hardly significant. So with the exception of the second, the Barre's correction, which is anyway only significant at the 10%, the other measures do not seem to be relevant. So to conclude, again, there seem not to be any confounding factor of alternative treatments at the threshold, and overall we do not find strong results of inter-municipal cooperation. So to conclude, and before I lose my last brief voice, before I die, no conclude, I want to conclude by recapping the overall findings of the paper and the fact we develop a new efficiency score for municipalities in Italy, but we are very happy and to provide insights on and perhaps to use this index in other contexts to advance the analysis on efficiency in this way. Then we do apply this efficiency score on the case of Italian municipalities, and we try to link the the effect of joining an intermunicipal cooperation on efficiency, but we do not find any efficiency dividend. This, of course, leads to an open question on why this is the case. We are unable to answer this question in this paper in particular, but it's something we are working on, and this perhaps opens up the Q&A and opens up research on the reason. Is it because it's implementation issues? Is it because intermunicipal cooperations may need time? Someone is suggesting that the negative effects or the null effects in the short term may be complemented by positive effects in the longer term. But this is very open to debate and to future research. With this, I conclude. Thank you very much for your attention. And I open the floor to questions. And thank you, Lionel and Marie.
Thank you, Davide. We have time for some questions. His presentation.
I have a question.
Yeah.
It's Aurélie. So my question is about the external validity of the estimation. I guess the validity is only around within the bandwidth of the estimation, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, here we face the traditional trade-off of empirical estimations, right? There is a trade-off between internal validity and external validity. So in the paper, we decided to go in more depth and do our best to identify, to find results which are internally valid, but then, of course, this compromises with external validity. Sorry. In a way, I would say it's if the exercise, the whole exercise of fostering cooperation or mergers is addresses small municipalities, the external validity should be relatively high because those are the target of the policy. But of course, having said that, the issue of external validity is behind any kind of empirical estimation which aims to be causal, so that aims to identify local average treatment effects.
Thank you, David.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your paper, very interesting. And of course, it's almost impossible to have both an exhaustive external validity and a perfect exogenous identification strategy. So
yeah, it's
a trade-off.
Yeah, thank you very much anyway for the question.
Any questions?
I have one question.
Sonia.
Sonia Patti speaking. Thank you for this very nice presentation. I had one question about the year of creation of the inter-municipal body. I understood that they didn't join the inter-municipal body at the same time. So is it possible to take into account this year of creation just to have some information on what you said at the end of your presentation? Maybe it takes time to be efficient. So would you include the year of creation of your intermunicipal body? Maybe you would know more about the efficiency. I don't know.
Yeah, I think thank you very much for the question because it's very spot on. And it's in fact one of the issues that we are trying to work. There was an issue of data in the sense that it's basically, as I showed, the law to compulsory asking to municipalities to join a body was in 2010, and our output, so we only have data for 2013. So there is you see that the window on which we are able to work on is not very wide. But in fact, we are exactly trying to get data, more recent data. These questionnaires on outputs where we run more recently, and we are trying to get hold of this data to exactly identify this potential time dimension. which we have reason to believe that that's the case, that over time cooperation may have some effects. Thank you very much. That's a very good question.
Thank you.
Yes, in 2013, so you wrote in the paper that the total expenditure of municipal unions is about 0.3% of total expenditure of Italian local government. And yes, this amount is quite low, and with more recent data, you could expect to have more integration and more expenditure in charge of municipal union. So it may also change. Yes.
Yeah, that's another very good point. It's thank you for reading the paper also. The point is, and we raised the critiques to local governments, for example, to who are working on inter-municipal cooperation. The answer that they would tell you is that the share of resources is very small, and that's what we stress in the paper. But actually, the benefits may go beyond resources, in the sense that there is a source of learning from cooperating. So the municipalities join together, they start providing services together. So potentially the channel through which this efficiency dividend plays is not economic, but it's through learning. So it's a sort of innovation spillovers across municipality. But still, we don't find any. So perhaps it's there is no spillover also on that side.
No, exactly. And is it possible in Italy to belong to several municipal unions? Because you compare Italian municipal unions with syndicates in France, and to belong to several syndicates.
Okay, so that's a bad comparison then. It's so to my best knowledge, it's nowadays is not possible. There is, of course, some churn in the municipalities joining these different unions. So the geography of unions has changed over time. But overall, to my best knowledge, it's municipalities only join one union, especially now when after 2010, when it has become compulsory. So if that's not the case in France, it's a bad comparison. I should correct it in the paper.
Yeah, in France, for EPCI, établissement public de coopération intercommunale à fiscalité propre, it's forbidden to belong to several
okay, yeah.
EPCI à fiscalité propre. But these groups have tax autonomy prior to syndicates.
Okay, yeah.
And have you tried to differentiate the input variable, for instance, between current and capital expenditures?
So we haven't, unfortunately, because well, first of all, it's if I don't mistake, I mean, I haven't worked on the data for some time, but we only include the current expenditure, so we don't include capital expenditure in our inputs. I know this is contentious, and we discussed about it in past seminars. And the point we do that is that we use this measure, which is provided by the same organization providing the outputs. And so, in a way, we try to be follow as close as possible what this organization is doing in terms of method and comparing inputs and outputs. But of course, one could argue that one should take into account capital spending, especially past capital spending, as an input. We are not doing at the moment. Perhaps we should check it. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks. And maybe last question for me. Have you tried to introduce political variables to determine whether a party is more efficient?
So that was one of our initial ideas. Unfortunately, we don't have enough observations at the threshold. So again, we decided to compromise on the kind of heterogeneity analysis that we can play on. So trying to differentiate between different political parties or the other categories, and focus on the internal validity of our estimated threshold. But that's one of the others we are thinking about, but we will have to change our estimation strategy because we wouldn't have enough observation at the cutoff to play with that. We tried it.
Thanks.
We have time for one or two other questions.
Hi, I may have a question. I'm Yassine. So in your database, are you able to differentiate communities, municipalities that created a new municipality union and municipalities that joined an existing municipality union?
So thank you for the question. That's another great one. Unfortunately, we are not able to do that. So that would be fantastic to identify. We are not able. We are just only able to identify if a municipality at a certain year is a part of a union and which union is part of it. But we are unable to track out whether the union was due or not.
Because you may have in your estimation, like you may have a catch up with the municipalities that are joining existing EI, and with those who are creating a new intercommunality, they may have a better power of negotiation and maybe do only projects that may increase their efficiency for them. I don't know, maybe.
Yeah, it's. I mean, it's absolutely perhaps linked to this question and somehow linked to the question that Marie, you were asking about political parties. It's also the dimension of the size of the municipal union. For example, there is a theoretical literature suggesting that the size is really important, and the fact that the presence of a large municipality within the municipal union, so a sort of big brother which can provide innovation spillover, for example. So there are many dimensions on which the effect of municipal unions may change depending on categories. Again, the point is that we struggle to exploit our the RDD strategy and playing with these differences. So so far we opted to focus on the strategy. I mean, to this narrow RDD and focusing on the internal validity and economizing on the rest. In the final part of the paper, actually, we try to somehow to use the matching estimator to provide to play with these alternative dimensions. But it's of course the matching estimator is less reliable in terms of identification. But that's definitely one of the future steps we are thinking about. This heterogeneous analysis across all these different dimensions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your answer.